If you have your Bible with you, I invite you to turn to Revelation 21. We'll read a couple verses in a minute. Several years ago, Debbie and I got a chance to go and visit some old friends in Alaska. All four of us, Chuck and Pam and Debbie and I, were members of a youth group at a church in the East End, and we were about 25 or 30 in a college and careers group. And when things started tearing off, I think there was something like 14 or 15 weddings over 3 summers, and we stayed friends and connected. Chuck and I shared an apartment for several years when we were finishing university together. We were in each other's wedding party, and the connection was always there. And so when Chuck and Pam moved to Alaska, we figured it was a good excuse for us to go up and see them and see some new territory that we've never seen before. Getting there was an interesting part of the process. We got some great deals on our flights. This was many, many years ago before COVID. We got some great deals on the flight, and to get those great deals, we drove to Burlington, and from Burlington we flew, I think, to Chicago, and then to Washington, to Seattle, and then up to Juneau, and then it was like 5 trips by the time I remember hitting the American border as we were driving to Burlington, and the guy at the border asked us, "Where are you going?" We said, "We're going to Alaska." And he looked in, he goes, "You know that's the other way, right?" We said, yeah, we're going to take a flight. We're going to go up there. And while we were there, Chuck and Pam had work commitments on several of the days during the day. We spent a lot of time together, evenings and weekends. They took a couple breaks, a couple holidays. But there were a few of the days where they both had to go to work. And so Debbie and I had to kind of go on our own and do our own thing. And we discovered the Alaska Marine Highway Ferry. So all the way along the Alaska Panhandle, there's a whole series of little villages and little towns that aren't really connected by roads during the summer. During the winter, there's a nice road that you can use to get there, but during the summer, the only way to get to all of these little isolated villages is something they call the Alaskan Marine Highway, and it's a ferry that hugs the coast and goes from little town to little town, all the way up, all the way down, all the way up, all the way down, every day, every day. And so we thought this was a chance for us to see some territory. And so we got on this ferry, and we just stayed on the ferry for several hours, and we got up as far as a little village called Skagway. And if you've never heard of Skagway, we had never heard of Skagway either. Skagway used to be a little Russian village when Alaska belonged to Russia, and it's sort of half Russian, half American, and it's this really weird collection of little stores and tourist traps. Basically, tourism is their trade. During most of the year, there's about 800 people that live there, and during the tourist season, there's about 3,000 people that live there. So tourist town. When Debbie and I got there, it was at the low season. There wasn't much to see. There were a couple shops. There were a couple tourist traps. We bought a couple Russian dolls, I think, and a few things, and we got a picture with the big train that cuts through the rail on the snow, and then after, 45 minutes in Skagway, we got back on the ferry and headed back down. And it was really the ferry ride that we wanted, because as you went along in the ferry, all the way up on the right, you had just the majestic mountains with the snow-covered mountains, the northern tips of the Rockies. They get even higher as you get there, more snow-covered because you're in Alaska. On the other side, you see a whole series of little islands. At moments, you can look out into the Pacific Ocean, out to the sea. I've never seen this many bald eagles. I've never seen bald eagles this large before in my life. It was just beautiful all the way there. And it was really funny because it was getting to Skagway that was really the fun part of the trip. It was a 3 or 4 hour ferry ride, and we got to Skagway. We spent 45 minutes and then turned around and got the trip home. And it was really the journey that was the exciting part of the journey. And we often say that. We often take trips. We go to places on holidays, and it's getting there that's half the fun. We go visit family in Wisconsin, wherever your family is, and getting there is often the fun part of the trip. And I can't tell you how many funerals I've been to where people try to tell me that this is what life is like. They will get to the end of life and we'll discover that it's the journey of getting there to the end of life that was the exciting part. And I keep wanting to tell them, you have no idea. You have no idea what awaits on the other side. And our text tonight very, very clearly affirms that. Our text tonight affirms that what waits for us on the other side is unbelievable compared to what we're living here. And in fact, the New Testament expresses that several times. I like the way Paul words it in the book of Romans at one point. He says, the sufferings of the present time aren't even worthy to be compared with the glory that awaits us on the other side. The journey is not the fun part. In many ways, the journey is the hard part of the trip, and we look forward to what we wait on the next side. And as we get a glimpse of that destination tonight, it's kind of tricky. I don't know if you do this sometimes, particularly when I read some of the narrative texts. I was going to say sometimes when I read these texts I close my eyes and imagine, but you can't close your eyes and read. But you know what I mean. As you're reading some of these texts sometimes in your mind, you try to picture and to imagine what this is like, what this will look like. And as you'll see, it's going to be a little hard to do that tonight, but we'll deal with that a little bit. Revelation 21, starting at verse 9, we read verses 1 to 8 last Sunday night, and it was sort of an intro to this. Verse 9, then came one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls full of the seven last plagues. You see this angel and you go, uh-oh, there's trouble. The last time we saw this guy, he was holding a bowl full of seven plagues, but not this time. He's got something very different to show us. And he spoke to me, says John, saying, come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great high mountain and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. Already you can see the strange contrast. He's going to show you a bride, but when he looks, he sees a city coming down. It's not just the bride, it's a city. Verse 11, having the glory of God, its radiance like a most rare jewel, like jasper, clear as crystal. It had a great high wall with 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels, and on the gates the names of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel were inscribed. On the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, on the west 3 gates. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. And the one who spoke with me had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city and its gates and walls. The city lies 4 square, its length the same as its width. And he measured the city with his rod, 12,000 stadia. Its length and width and height are equal. He also measured its wall, 144 cubits by human measurement, which is also an angel's measurement. The wall was built of jasper, while the city was pure gold like clear glass. The foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with every kind of jewel. The first was jasper, the second sapphire, the third agate, the fourth emerald, the fifth onyx, the sixth carnelian, the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, the 10th chrysoprase, the 11th jacinth, and the 12th amethyst. And the 12 gates were 12 pearls, each of the gates made of a single pearl, and the street of the city was pure gold, like transparent glass. And I saw no temple in the city, for its temple is the Lord God, the Almighty, and the Lamb. And the city has no need of sun or moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it light, and its lamp is the Lamb. By its light will the nations walk, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. And its gates will never be shut by day, and there will be no night there. They will bring into it the glory and the honor of the nations, but nothing unclean will ever enter it, nor anyone who does what is detestable or false, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, on Sunday mornings when I prepare for the morning service, I often look at the text that we're going to deal with in Luke these last couple of months, and I always try and find if there's an image or a picture that would work well for the children's story. And then I try and come up with, some Lego blocks or some illustration or something that will sort of drive the point home. And as I was thinking about the text tonight and reading it and preparing, I thought maybe I should have invited Joanne Masood Adzagan to come and talk to us a little bit about architecture. Joanne is an architect by trade, and she does this. She does building design, and Joanne's specialty actually is the outer coverings of buildings. And I thought with all of these buildings with this gold and jewelry and topaz that maybe, and I had a better idea. Well, maybe what we need is not a building contractor like Joanne, but there's so many precious jewels here. I don't know if many of you realize this, but Gerlinda Lansing used to work with fine jewelry. And I thought, no, we don't need Joanne. We need Gerlinda, because there's more jewels and precious stone and gold than architecture. It's not 2x4s and masonry. It seems to be, and it's pretty hard to figure out what's here. I have to tell you that in years of trying to understand this text and preach from it, I've seen dozens and dozens of sketches, of diagrams, of artists' renderings, trying to decipher the description and draw what the city would look like. Some parts of it are easy, and others are a little harder to interpret. And I'm not sure that what John gives us in Revelation 21 is an exact architectural diagram that we could use to recreate a replica of the New Jerusalem. Some of you have seen the little Lego replica I made of the church downstairs, and I'm not sure that with the description in here with my Lego, I could make a replica of the New Jerusalem. It's just the descriptions aren't given to us for that reason. In a nutshell, what John sees appears to be a large cubic city, as tall and wide as it is long. And the dimensions are striking. The city is a perfect cube that is almost 1,500 miles in every direction. 1,500 miles, that's a third the width of Canada. So that would go from St. John's, Newfoundland, almost to Sault Ste. Marie width. It would go from the American border, because yes, Mr. Trump, the American border is still there. We're still a separate country, almost all the way to the Arctic Circle, and it would begin about as high. Now, I don't know, 1,500 miles tall. I don't know if that's a high-rise building. Is John seeing a skyscraper? Maybe it's a residential complex like Habitat 67 in the Montreal Harbor with all of these cubes stacked on top of one another. I just get to the point where I can't quite imagine or figure out what this is supposed to look like. But very importantly, John doesn't express the dimension in miles. And it's very, very regrettable that there's a bunch of the English translations that helpfully try to convert the dimensions into miles. And it doesn't work. Because there's 2 points that are being made by the measurements. One is it's big. It's massive. And the other one is that the numbers are important. It's 12,000 stadia. A stadia is a common length of the day, would have been about 200 meters. It's the word from which we get a stadium, by the way. The basic foot race in the Olympic Games was a stadia. It was the length of a stadium, was 200 meters. So today I think we do that now in athletics. We measure the fastest man in the world no longer by the 100-meter dash, but by the 200 meters. I think that's the gold standard. You know, so the stadia, the length of a stadium, 200 meters. Well, there's 12,000 of these. And the important thing about the measurement are the factors of 12 that are symbolic in the sheer size of the city. The number 12 is the number of completeness. And it appears regularly throughout the scriptures to emphasize that. And the fact that the city is a perfect cube is also very striking. I don't know if you realize this, but there is only one other perfect cube described prominently in the scriptures. There's only one other structure that was a perfect cube. In the tabernacle, they carried through the wilderness, the Holy of Holies, the inner sanctum, the holiest part of the tabernacle, was a perfect cube. It was 10 cubits by 10 cubits by 10 cubits high. And interestingly, the inside was completely covered with gold. Now, when Solomon and Herod built their temples, they changed the dimensions. They made it a little bit bigger, and it was no longer a perfect cube. Both Solomon and Herod wanted to show off a little bit, so they doubled the sizes and the widths and the length, and it was no longer a perfect cube. But interestingly, the tabernacle in the wilderness, the Holy of Holies, was a perfect cube. And there's other details in the description that are meant to take us back to the tabernacle. The 12 foundations of the wall of the New Jerusalem were adorned with jewels. As John lists the 12 kinds of jewels that were included, we're reminded of the breastplate of the ephod of the high priest who served in the tabernacle. The high priest who served in the tabernacle had this breastplate that represented the people of Israel. He had his white cotton garment, there was a turban that he wore, but on his breast there was sort of like a bulletproof vest, I guess it looked like. There was a big square thing, and there were 12 patches with 12 different kinds of jewel. It was a perfect square. with 12 different kinds of stones representing the 12 different tribes of Israel. We don't have time tonight, but each one of the colors of stone is linked to one of the tribes of Israel, and there's symbolism in each one of the colors and each one of the tribes and what they represent and who they are. Now, unfortunately, it's hard to make a perfect match because the names by which some of the stones are known in Hebrew and the names by which some in the Old Testament, in the book of Exodus, in Exodus 28, and some of the Greek names in Revelation 21, they don't transcribe exactly. But we can match 8 of them very specifically, and we think the other 4, there's some translation issues. But the 12 stones that are here, we believe, are the same 12 stones that were on the ephod of the breastplate of the high priest. There's several interesting theories about the stones, by the way. If you have a little time on the internet and you want to do some Googling, these 12 stones apparently are the 12 most basic precious stones. And again, last week somebody was chatting with me about this with me. Apparently these 12 stones give off colors and emanations and wavelength things that are unique. Anyway, I didn't have time to look into all of this tonight. It's homework for you if you want, if you're interested in jewelry and color. But there's 12 of them. A powerful reminder of the 12 tribes of Israel, which coincides with the 12 gates of the city, each one of which has inscribed the name of one of the 12 tribes of Israel. So far we go, this is pretty good. This is sounding pretty Jewish. This is the people of God from the Old Testament. There's 12 foundations. There's the 12 tribes of Israel. There's the breastplate. There's the ephod. There's 12 by 12 by 12. It's a perfect cube, like the Holy of Holies. And so far, this is sounding like something pretty Jewish, except there's these strange gates. The gates to the tabernacle, there was only one way in. It was a privileged way in. And there was a couple of veils that you had to walk through. This holy place, this holy city, it doesn't seem like they're trying to keep anybody out. There's 3 big gates on the east, 3 big gates on the west, 3 big gates on the south, and 3 big gates on the north. And strikingly, which is really weird, the gates are never shut. So you've got a city with a wall. Usually that means that it's for protection. Usually if you have a city for a wall with a wall, it's a fortified city. You do this to keep people out, to keep yourself safe. But this city doesn't have one well-protected gate. It's got 12 gates, 3 in each direction, welcoming people from all over the world. And you know what? Those gates, they're never shut. And in case you missed the widening call of the city has 12 foundations on which are written not the names of the 12 tribes, but the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb who were sent to preach the gospel to the nation. So the city encompasses both the Old Testament people of God and the New Testament church, both of them composed into one new entity. But there are a couple of other important parallels that we need to notice in the description of New Jerusalem. In verse 10, we're told that John is taken to a high mountain where he's given a vision of this incredible new construction where very, very precise measurements are taken. This happens at 2 other places in Scriptures. There's 3 times in the Bible where a prophet, somebody is taken to a high mountain, he's shown a building, and he's given precise measurement. I'm sure you can remember the first one. In the book of Exodus, Moses is invited to the top of Mount Sinai. And on the top of the high mountain of Sinai, he's given a vision of the tabernacle, a place of worship. It's a temple with precise measurement. And God gives him the cubits and the dimensions and the measurement of what this building is going to look like. And then a similar thing happens to the prophet Ezekiel. In Ezekiel 40, Ezekiel has a vision. Again, he's brought to a high mountain, and there he sees a majestic city that actually turns out to be a temple. He looks and he says, it looks like a great city, and as he looks closer, he sees the outer courtyard, he sees the gates, he sees the veil, he sees the inner courtyard, he sees the holy and holy. And here in Revelation, for the 3rd time in Scripture, the same thing happens, this time to John. Taken to a high mountain. He's shown a building. This time there's a city, and an angel is taking measurements. Except that this time, unlike the Moses vision in Exodus, and unlike the Ezekiel vision, there's a city, but there's no temple. Now, by definition, a temple is needed when you need a place to worship God. When God is actually physically with you, there's no longer any need for a temple. I remember several years ago counseling a couple who were struggling, and the wife complained that her husband wasn't spending enough time with the kids, and the kids missed him. And she made this interesting comment. She said, He's got the pictures of the kids in his wallet. I've got the kids. I offered to trade. I said, give me the picture for a while, and you take the kids with you. And this is what contrasts John's vision with Ezekiel's and Moses. In Moses' vision and in Ezekiel's vision, they see images. They see a temple portraying the presence of God, but not the New Jerusalem. In the New Jerusalem, there's no temple because the presence of God is there. And this is what makes the New Jerusalem special. It doesn't just represent God. It isn't just a place where we go to think about God. It doesn't just provide a place where we can go and worship God at a safe distance. The New Jerusalem is the place where He is, where He actually dwells. And we saw it in the first 8 verses, about 3 or 4 times in the space of 6 or 7 verses. It says, God is there. God dwells there. This is where God lives. He will be their God. We will be His people. And He will dwell there with us. It was repeated 3 or 4 times in those first 8 verses. So this leads us to one final and most critical parallel that we briefly touched on last Sunday evening. And this sort of overlap has been happening since the beginning of the book. Earlier in the book of Revelation, we were told that the marriage supper of the Lamb was at hand. Last week in verse 2 of chapter 21, we read that John sees the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down from heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. Tonight in verse 9, the angel, he's scary at first because he's the same one who was holding the bad stuff in the bowls of judgment, but he's come for a different purpose. The angel tells John that he will show him the bride, the wife of the Lamb. But when the vision unfolds, he doesn't see a woman, but instead he sees a city. He sees the holy city of Jerusalem. Now, I've challenged you a couple of times, and I hope you get to the point where you have a chance to do this. I've challenged you a couple of times that at some point you need to set aside 25 minutes or half an hour and sit down and read all of the book of Revelation through from one end to the other. All 21 chapters. Shouldn't take you more than about 20 or 25 minutes. About a minute and a half per chapter. And as you read through it, there's some parallels you'll notice. And one of the parallels you'll notice is that there's 2 big cities described in Revelation. We finished dealing with the bad city. There was the great harlot, the city of Babylon. And there's the pure bride of Christ, the New Jerusalem. And the contrast between them could not be any greater. The harlot Babylon has this skin-deep, striking appearance. She's bejeweled and she's decked in beautiful clothing, but it's alluring and tempting. But in the end, it's filled with the tawdry ugliness of sin and evil. On the outside, she looks pretty, she looks attractive, but deep down, she's filled with evil. The New Jerusalem, interestingly, it uses some of the same beauty descriptions to talk about the New Jerusalem with the jewels, but it's completely different. The holy city is bejeweled and adorned with precious stones, but like a pure bride on her wedding night, not like a harlot walking the streets. And this all ties in unmistakably to the image of the bride of Christ that builds throughout the New Testament epistles. Listen to what Paul says in Ephesians 5, verses 25 to 27. Maybe this is preparation for Valentine's Day, a couple of you husbands. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. Now, I understand that what Paul is talking about in Ephesians, in a sense, is figurative. He's talking about the way the Lord Jesus Christ, as he works with his church, is sanctifying her and purifying her by the preaching of the word. But we believe that there is the moment in Revelation 21 tonight where Ephesians 5, 25 to 27 comes to fruition. We think in Revelation 21, this is the moment when the bride of the Lamb, when Christ presents the church, the New Jerusalem, in all of the jewelry, in all of the finery, ready for the wedding supper of the Lamb, the bride of the Lamb, the wife of the Lamb, she's called, is presented in all her glory, in all her beauty. Just as the great harlot was the personification of all that is evil and immoral and of the world systems, all the things that rose up from the abyss in her filth and immorality, and ultimately she's destroyed and sent into the pit. In great contrast, John sees this beautiful city tonight. He doesn't just call her Jerusalem. He doesn't just call her the city of Jerusalem. Did you get that? He calls her the holy city Jerusalem. And it comes not from the abyss and from the pit. It comes down out of heaven from God, spotless and pure, the very embodiment of the holy presence of God. So back to the question we asked when we started last week, and where there seemed to be this overlap: is the New Jerusalem the bride of Christ? Is she a woman? Is she a place? Is she... The glory of the New Jerusalem is who is there. God is there, and His redeemed people are there. There is God and His holiness and purity, and there's us, His church, redeemed and purified. Its many gates always open to the nations of the world, bringing in the glory and the honor of the nations. So as we wait for this city to come down, this city in which we seem to play a role, this city in which we will be in the presence of the Lamb as the redeemed, taking part in this bridal supper that's there, what do? Do we just sit and wait? Verse 27 says that nothing unclean will ever enter that city, nor anyone who does anything detestable or false, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life. So our desire for that city evidently leads us to be sure that our names are written in the Lamb's book of life. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. You want to make sure that your name is in that book to make it there. But it also leads us to purifying ourselves. We strive towards purity that reflects the holiness of God because we want to be a part of the scene when the church is presented to Christ spotless and pure. This is what we hope for. And John says the one who has this hope purifies himself as he himself is pure. Now, I hope you're not disappointed. I know a couple of you tonight were probably waiting for me to tell you about streets paved with gold and about how they use gold as asphalt in their construction projects. I almost told you the story about the very wealthy man who thought he'd take some of it with him, and he reduced all of his possessions to gold bullion, and he had the gold bullion put into 2 briefcases that were handcuffed to him in his casket. And when he gets to the pearly gates and he's still there with his 2 briefcases full of gold bullion, and St. Peter asks him, "Oh, brother, what have you got in the briefcases?" And he opens the briefcases and there's these beautiful gold bullion. And St. Peter says, "Look at this, guys. He brought some asphalt with him." The important part of Revelation 21 is not the details of whether you'll be in a king-size suite with a double bathroom, not what the streets will be paved with. It's the anticipation of this moment of the presence of God, of His holiness and of purity in which we'll get to share. If you'll allow me a few more minutes, there's one more parallel that I thought I couldn't miss tonight. And I always have this parallel in the back of my mind when I think about this text about the New Jerusalem. And it's found in Hebrews 11. And strangely, it's a text about Abraham. Hebrews 11, verses 8 to 10. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive his inheritance. Now, Abraham lived in Ur of the Chaldees. It's a big, idolatrous, pagan city where all of his family worshipped idols and foreign gods. And God called him out of that, and he became an errant pilgrim through the wilderness. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. By faith, he went to live in the land of promise as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise. People ask me sometimes whether I like camping in tents, and I tell them I like camping so much that I have a group discount with a chain of campgrounds called Holiday Inn. That's my camping. But Abraham left this big, solid, sturdy city with walls and ramparts, and he became a pilgrim traveling through the desert, pitching his tent through the desert. But this is why he did in faith. Verse 10. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. Abraham's faith led him not to look for a bigger city than the one he left. He didn't leave Chicago to find New York City. That's not the issue. It's not that he was looking for a bigger man-made city that was better than the one he left. This is not what he was looking for. Abraham realized that the world we live in is transient, it's temporary, it's fleeting. Fortunes change in the twinkle of an eye. Nothing is firm, nothing is solid, nothing is guaranteed. And we strive together to do the work of God, and we build the church together here below, but we realize that even some of the best of our efforts have short-lived results, and something can happen in a snap. We can lose all that we've built over years. And in contrast, all of this feels like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob living in tents, wandering in the wilderness, but looking for a permanent city. Not the old Ur of the Chaldees, the big idolatrous city that Abraham had left, but another city, a better city, not made with human hands, a city that has foundations, real, solid foundations, more solid than anything here below, a city that is safe, where no evil will befall us, a city that is so safe that they leave all of the doors, all of the gates open all day and all night, and nothing evil can come in, a city whose designer and builder is God. Over the last couple of months, we've been dealing with the after effect of several prominent leaders committing sin in the church and bringing abuse and scandal. And a number of us as pastors, as we get together and as we pray and as we think about this, I had this comment. It's comments been made several times. One of the regrettable things about this is that in many people's heads, the church is no longer a safe place. There's so many Christian leaders that have fallen, that have crossed inappropriate lines, that people are starting to think, well, even the church that's supposed to be a place of safety, unfortunately, isn't as safe as it's supposed to be. And everything in me reacts against that, in part because we have this longing for that city whose designer and builder is God, where there will be no evil, where there will be no abuse, where there will be no sin, where there will be perfect safety. A city whose designer and builder is God. Wonder if you've ever heard of a city like that. Don't know about you, but that sure is the place where I'd like to spend the end of my days. The city whose designer and builder is God. Amen.